Sometimes they weren't in love with you, they were in love with how being loved by you made them feel. When someone's self-worth is built on borrowed admiration, they'll chase whoever mirrors their importance loudest, even if it means shattering hearts on the way. Welcome to Broken Truth, where love meets lies, and every story reveals the pain behind the smile. People who are addicted to validation often enter relationships not out of deep connection, but to fill a void within themselves. They crave admiration, attention, praise, not as occasional affirmations, but as oxygen when the initial highs of being desired fade and love matures into depth and routine. They begin to feel empty again. This is when they start seeking fresh eyes to reflect back their worth, not because they've stopped loving you, but because they never learned how to love themselves without an audience. Betrayal in these cases isn't always premeditated. It's compulsive, impulsive, and rooted in insecurity masked as charm. And the worst part? They often convince themselves it's not betrayal, just connection. She gave him the kind of love that asks for nothing loud, nothing showy, just presence. The kind of love that clapped for his smallest efforts, that found magic in the mundane. She didn't need fireworks to stay, just him real and still breathing next to her. And maybe that was the problem. He didn't know how to be loved quietly. He only knew how to be admired at first. He adored that about her, how she didn't need to be impressed, how she found beauty in his mess, but slowly that adoration turned into restlessness, like a man who wandered into a quiet sanctuary but kept looking for applause. He would sit across the table from her, and his fingers would twitch toward his phone, not to talk to someone else, but to post, to perform, to be seen. Her presence was calming, but it wasn't thrilling, and people addicted to validation mistake peace for boredom. She noticed the small shifts, how he started taking longer to respond to her messages, but replied instantly to compliments on his stories. How his eyes lingered longer on praise than they did on her. How he started needing to be everywhere, all at once. Every party, every circle, every place he could shine. She watched as his need to be seen eclipsed his ability to see her. Still, she stayed, because love, to her, wasn't a performance. It was a choice, a returning, a promise made again and again in silence. But silence to him wasn't a comfort. It was a void he didn't know how to sit with. There was no grand betrayal, no dramatic confession, just a name dropped by a friend over coffee. Did you know he's been seeing someone else? Her hands didn't shake, her voice didn't rise, but something inside her folded in, quietly, fatally, like a bridge that had been carrying weight too long, finally giving way. And the worst part? She wasn't even surprised. She had felt the slow withdrawal, the detachment disguised as busyness, the emotional distance camouflaged as distraction, and still she had waited for him to return to her, for the echo of their first days to come back, but they never did. And when she confronted him, he didn't deny it, he just shrugged. I didn't mean for it to happen. 7 words that sliced cleaner than knives. He hadn't meant to. Because people addicted to validation never set out to betray. They simply chase reflection, and when your reflection stops thrilling them, they look elsewhere, not to replace you, but to revive themselves, and in the process, they discard you like a mirror that stopped flattering. She walked away with no storm, no threats, no broken plates, just a heart so full of ache it made silence feel like screaming. Nights became questions. Was I not enough? Did I stop mattering? Was my love too ordinary? But deep down, in the marrow of her bones, she knew the truth. She had loved him completely. It wasn't her lack that caused the betrayal. It was his emptiness. People like him don't want love. They want admiration. They want to be adored, not known. And when someone sees through them, truly sees the cracks, they panic. Because love, real love, demands presence, and presence is something they cannot offer without an audience. She remembered all the times she held space for him, clapped for him when no one was watching, whispered praise when the world went quiet, and now someone else was getting his spotlight while she was left with the backstage silence. The discarded loyalty, the invisible wounds, but even then, she didn't hate him, she pitied him, because he would go through life like that, hopping from one admirer to another, never pausing long enough to feel safe, only long enough to feel seen. He would smile wide for photos and feel hollow in his solitude, and every time applause faded, he would need a new stage, a new audience, a new name to echo his worth back to him, and she would heal, not because time is magic, but because truth is, and the truth was, she didn't lose him, he lost her. He lost someone who saw through the act and loved him anyway. Someone who found poetry in his silence, not just power in his noise. Healing came slowly, in moments, not milestones. She stopped checking his page. She stopped comparing herself to the new girl. She started drinking her coffee slowly again, not bitter with rage, but soft with release. She began journaling, sleeping through the night, breathing without waiting for a message that would never come. She started remembering who she was before she was trying to keep someone who'd never planned to stay. Some nights still hurt when a certain song played, when a couple laughed on the sidewalk, when a memory flashed uninvited. But pain, she learned, wasn't the enemy. It was proof she had loved deeply. And loving deeply was never the mistake. Choosing someone who couldn't hold that depth. That was, and in time she stopped asking why she wasn't enough, because she was. He just didn't have the heart to receive it. In the days that followed, she didn't post sad quotes or revenge songs. She didn't burn his things or stage a dramatic goodbye. She simply stopped performing pain for anyone. Her silence was not an absence. It was an awakening. The world didn't need to see her grieve in order for it to be real. She knew what it cost. She knew what it meant to carry a heart that was never mirrored back. At first, the quiet felt like punishment, like standing alone in a room that once held music, but slowly she began to notice something in that stillness. The sound of her own voice returning, the rhythm of her breath slowing. The way mornings started to feel less heavy. She didn't need closure from him. She needed clarity from herself, and that clarity came not in a single moment, but in fragments. Tiny realizations she stitched together like a quilt, like the way she used to shrink herself so his spotlight could feel bigger, or how she learned to clap louder, not because he needed it, but because she feared losing him if she didn't, or how every time she felt unseen, she questioned her worth instead of his capacity. Now she saw it with painful precision. He was not looking for a partner. He was looking for praise. And no matter how deeply she loved him, she could never compete with the crowd he kept chasing. Love like that is exhausting, not because it asks for too much, but because it gives too little back. One morning, weeks later, she opened her window and sat by the light. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just breathed fully for the first time in a while. And it hit her. Peace doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just quietly replaces panic. She stopped rereading old messages, stopped checking who liked his posts, stopped needing to prove she was the better choice because it no longer mattered. He had betrayed her, yes, but more than that, he had betrayed the version of himself that could have grown, that could have healed, that could have stayed. She started taking walks alone. Not to feel less lonely, but to feel more herself. She picked up old hobbies, painting, reading, writing small things in the Notes app. And every night before sleeping, she'd whisper one sentence to herself. I am not hard to love, I was. Just offering it to someone who didn't know how to receive it. She met people slowly, not to replace him, but to remind herself that connection still exists. She looked for different things now. Not chemistry, but consistency, not attention, but presence. She listened more to her body's signals, her intuition, her sense of calm around someone. If someone spoke too much of themselves and not enough with her, she noticed. If someone needed to be admired more than understood, she stepped back. She learned the difference between charm and care. Healing wasn't glamorous, it was small choices, leaving when it felt wrong. Even when it wasn't dramatic, speaking kindly to herself when the mirror reflected old insecurities, saying no without guilt, saying yes without fear. She didn't become cold, she became clear. The next time someone tried to make her feel like love needed to be earned, she didn't try harder, she walked away faster. The next time someone offered her attention but not respect, she didn't question her standards, she questioned their presence. And the next time someone stayed, truly stayed, not for her. What she gave, but for who she was, she recognized it not as luck, but as alignment. Because now, she was her own witness. She didn't need the spotlight, she just needed truth. She didn't want a stage. She wanted a mirror, and in loving herself, quietly, patiently, fully, she began to understand. Some people lose us not because we're too much, but because we no longer accept being too little to them. And that's not heartbreak, that's freedom. Some people don't betray you because you weren't enough. They betray you because they need constant reminders that they are. And sometimes, even your love isn't loud enough to drown out their emptiness. For more raw truths and healing stories, subscribe to Broken Truth, where we say what love often leaves unsaid.